Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
When you know I've been a liar.
You sure have been a liar.
A double-crossing liar.
A double-crossing liar.
Oh, my doggone cheating liar.
Well, we're talking about fraud today, and ICBC and their campaign they have out in the media talking about fraud, and they're claiming it's $100 to $150 a year for every individual policy throughout British Columbia, is coming to the total of $400 to $600 million added in costs to the system. To talk about it today, we have Joe Murphy from MurphyBattista and Bill Dick from the Kelowna office of MurphyBattista joining us in studio. Now, what you're been saying through the show is that money is collected through ICBC and funneled into general revenue through to the provincial government. But there's other fees that get added in here that go into general revenue. For example, you're paying tax on your premium.
Yeah, it's interesting, Zach, because when I go to a store and buy something, it'll give me the price and it'll show me the taxes that I'm paying in the total. And ICBC pays or charges 4.4% tax that goes to the provincial government. There's about $4 billion a year in insurance, auto insurance premiums, so that works out to about $200 million a year. But when I go and buy my insurance, I don't see any line that says tax payable.
Mm-hmm.
That's not obvious. It's hidden. But the government gets that money. Now, I don't have a problem with the government getting the money because I know they're going to spend it on health and education and social services, and I don't have any problem with that. But I have a problem with when that money is hidden, and then when this advertising campaign comes out and suggests the problem, the waste in the system, the rising costs are because of fraud, when that's simply not the case.
What about funneling money into MSP? There's something going on there.
Well, the ICBC policy says we pay medical expenses, but not those covered by MSP. So if you're in an accident and you need physio, you go to physio and MSP pays a certain amount. You get, I think, 12 a year. And ICBC pays an additional amount. But what the government's been doing since 2012 is they've been paying back MSP for all the money for the treatment, even though the policy says that's not covered. And it started out in 2012, $25 million a year. And estimate for last year, 2015, $40 million a year. Since 2012, about $130 million. That's money that's going from ICBC to the government. And again, I don't have a problem with that because they're spending it somewhere else. But it's hidden. And again, the suggestion that, oh, fraud's the problem. I've got a statement here that the minister was quoted, and this isn't a quote, but it refers to it. It says, the minister says fraudulent and exaggerated claims are also the culprits behind rising rates, and added resources will take action to keep those numbers low. So that's the culprit that's being pointed at, when in fact ICBC runs a very good system. They provide an excellent product. They know how to handle claims. They're careful not to pay out any money on claims unless they think it's justified. But we have the provincial government taking out hundreds of millions of dollars a year from ICBC, but that's all hidden. So if the rates go up, that could probably be avoided if the government stopped taking that money out. The rates went up in 2012. The basic rate for the basic package went up 11.2%. That is, in the 2 years prior to that, the government had taken $680 million out of ICBC.
Well, it seems to me that this is a nice. We're talking, we've added up 1.2 billion earlier, and it adds up to. It seems like a bit of a cash machine for the government.
It is. It's one could say the government has almost become addicted to the revenue from gambling and the revenue from ICBC, and there's also significant money that goes from hydro. So we pay our hydro rates, but what we don't know is a chunk of that goes to the government general revenues.
Interesting. Well, the one that you're talking about, tax on tax, is you buy a bottle of wine, and we all know how much tax is on a bottle of wine, all these fees, and then you pay sales tax.
Yeah.
My family was visiting for a few months, and they said, "You pay tax at the liquor store? Isn't the whole liquor store tax?" And I said, "No, you still have to pay the sales tax." So
The sin tax.
yeah, taxes on taxes, which is what you're saying for, we're paying tax into general revenue. They're taking all of this money out. So can you give us some examples of British Columbia versus, you were talking maybe about Alberta and how it's right next door and the systems differ?
Well, it is interesting when people just look at insurance premium dollars as the basic package, and they say, well, let's compare it to other jurisdictions. If you're going to compare, you should be comparing everything from my perspective. And just as an example, the private insurers in Alberta, because it's a private insurance-based system, you get benefits, no-fault benefits in British Columbia in terms of rehabilitation and things of that nature, up to $150,000. So if you need, massage therapy and physiotherapy and a number of different things, you can access that on a no-fault basis up to $150,000. In Alberta, the contracts for their equivalent benefits is about $10,000. So it's a different package. And we're talking about our American friends. In British Columbia, we have a minimum third-party liability insurance of $200,000. The idea is that this is a system. Everyone's driving a car. You have to have mandatory insurance because it's there for victims. It's there to compensate people who have been injured. That's the whole idea behind our system of insurance. In the United States, their minimums are often $25,000, and most people carry only $25,000 worth of coverage.
Really?
Because we act for people who get hit down in the States quite often, and I tell them, my guess is they're only going to be $25,000 in insurance available, and sure enough, that's usually what the case is. So it's very different.
Joe, we talked in previous shows. What's it called? The UMP or the?
Yeah, the underinsured motorist protection. So the policy coverage in the U.S. might be 25 or 40 or 50, but one of the coverages that ICBC offers to everybody in the family where there's a vehicle is underinsured motorist protection. So if you're injured in an accident in North America, almost invariably ICBC will provide up to $1 million Canadian of insurance monies to pay your claim. We have a great insurance package. Bill mentioned the minimum coverage in BC is $200,000. The average coverage, because people have become so aware of it, the average car in BC has about $1.4 million in coverage, which is the highest in North America.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we have.
Well, because I find the difference is between I have $5 million on my cars because it's so inexpensive,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it is interesting. So where does the money that the government revenues come from? It's from their coverage that's offered beyond the $200,000. So their excess policies, which is what you're talking about. ICBC competes with private insurers for that money, and they have to be a little bit more competitive, but they're still making huge profit on those sales because people come in and they're going to get their basic insurance coverage, and I think most people don't want to shop around. It's relatively inexpensive. ICBC is keeping those rates relatively modest in terms of their rate increase. The example of 2012 where the basic coverage went up 11%, it actually went down for the excess coverage because they have to compete with the private insurance companies.
So we have just a few minutes here. What do you say when people hear these ads on the radio or watch them on television or in the newspaper? What do you say? Take it with a grain of salt. This fraud campaign, Joe?
Not even with a grain of salt. It's dishonest to suggest that ICBC has been asleep at the switch since 1972 and foolishly paid out a whole bunch of money on fraudulent claims, because that's not the case.
They're saying between $400 and $600 million a year. That's a huge amount of money.
If that was the case, ICBC would have been all over it. They wouldn't be agreeing to the settlements. They agree to the 99 out of 100, and they wouldn't be going to court in only 1 in 100 cases. The trial could be in front of a jury, 8 people in a civil jury in BC. These are people paying premiums. They're not going to give people more money than they think they're entitled to. The system runs beautifully. The problem we have with the system, and I think the reason behind the fraud program, is the amount of money the government is drawing out of ICBC every year, and the desire to have someone else as the boogeyman when
Don't look
premiums
behind
go
the
up.
curtain, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
trust us. Trust us.
Thank you both for coming in. Bill Dick from the Murphy-Battista office in Kelowna, and Joe Murphy himself here, QC from downtown Vancouver. We've been talking about ICBC on The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer, and we'll speak to you next time.